Well, I get why everyone loves this series. Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I will be reviewing The Way of Kings, the first book in the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. Like I said, The Way of Kings is the first book in the Stormlight Archives. There are currently 4 books out. Brandon Sanderson is like halfway through writing the 5th one, and I think this is supposed to be a 10-book series in total, but kind of split up into the first 5 and the second 5. I think he's mentioned that, there's going to be kind of a big gap in between the first and second half. But this is also my, let's see, I gotta check my notes, my 9th Sanderson novel, not counting the last 3 Wheel of Time books. So if you count those, this is my 12th book by him. So I'm definitely getting into his portfolio of stuff at this point. And after reading this, I really am starting to understand why people love this series so much in particular from everything he's written. So let's go ahead and I'll talk about what I liked, what I thought was good, and what I thought was bad, which there isn't that much, but I have a few little nitpicky things. But let's go ahead and start with what I thought was good. So let's just go ahead and kick it off with the characters. I loved pretty much every main point of view character. Kaladin, how do you say it? Shallan? I think that's how you say it. Dalinar, Yesna were really kind of like my highlighted ones. And there's one more that I will mention kind of separately because I don't think he really fits in as like a main character, but I really liked an aspect that they brought to the story. Let's go ahead and start with Kaladin because there's 2 things that I liked about Kaladin as a character. I'll just quickly mention the narrative structure we kind of get around Kaladin, where we get these flashbacks that build up to the point that we are in the series. Man, those flashbacks really make you feel for this character. Let's just start off, he's also just a badass, but the journey that he goes on is so fulfilling, and I mean just really lifelike. It just all made sense. And the whole time I just was like on the edge of my seat. I wanted to know, how did we get to this really jaded character who obviously has like so much good inside of him? When we're first introduced to him, it's like a character that's or something that's covered in rust, but if you like polish it off, it's like shiny underneath. And that's really kind of what we start off with him, and getting those flashbacks and that kind of narrative structure around him just in general was just so well done that, by the time we're getting to the end of the book, you understand all of his motivation and like what drives him as a person, and this is just, a book, but he felt so realized and fleshed out that, it was just kind of a next level character development in one book. And I'm sure with some of the trauma that this character has gone through, and I'm sure will continue to go through, the growth that we saw just in one book, let alone what's going to happen in this whole series, is just, next level crazy kind of stuff. And it's just really well done, just masterclass of, developing a character in a unique way too. We could have followed him. There are some series where we would have followed him from the time he was that young and experienced all those things in like a chronological through line until we got to where he was. And then, it could have been like split into different books, and instead just kind of weaving in just enough information to like give you the picture without having to show you like everything that happened. Every beat by beat thing was just awesome. And I mentioned it already, but he is a badass. Some of the stuff we get to see him do is just, I don't know, I really always like displays of like expertise, and particularly when it comes to something where there's fighting and stuff. When a character is really well written and it like explains why they are good at like a form of combat, and then seeing that combat in action is really awesome. And there are a couple characters that that happens with in this book, but Kaladin was really well done. Again, maybe I should have just made the narration style of this book its own good, which count that here. But we kind of get the same thing with Dalinar, where we get the dream sequences, or whatever we want to call them, that just kind of, it adds like a mystery to his character and everything that, goes on. He's this high prince. He's, one of the 12, 13-ish most powerful people, in his space. And, to have him have these things that make him doubt himself were just awesome. And, it kept the narrative really fresh because, it was just something I hadn't seen done that way before. And so getting to experience it with this kind of character who obviously had a lot of growth. We hear him talk about himself beforehand and, the changes that he made, and we get to see how, he did that. This is obviously becomes a very stoic character, and then having all that self-doubt brought in between the fact of is he going crazy or not is just awesome. He also just kind of fits that trope of like the old war vet who's like seen some stuff and has changed in a way for the better. It really seemed like he is a driving factor moving forward for everybody. It's not just him being better, but he's forcing other people to be better as well. And it's not easy for him to do. That's a whole battle he fights, is trying to get other people to be better. And, he thinks that he's not going crazy, but he's not sure. But the things he's seeing and understanding, he's trying to make the world better. And that's always awesome. It's done very differently. But this character kind of reminded me, and it's because they kind of fit the same character trope, the war vet, the old hardened war vet who's seen stuff, but reminded me a little bit of Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender, where, they were one way that was probably not good, earlier on in their life. And as they have grown up and had the consequences of their action come to be, they changed for the better. And, they want to redeem themselves for what they've done, which, is a hard thing to do, especially when they've done some of the bad stuff they have done. So just really well done. The characters have just been fantastic. And I don't know, Dalinar might be my favorite character. I've really kind of been wrapping my head trying to figure out who is in this book. And it might be Dalinar. It could honestly be any of these characters because I think they're all pretty great. Yesna seems to be kind of the contrary voice we get in this world. And what I mean by that is it really seems that when it comes to religion and society for certain aspects of this world, and it's huge, but she is kind of that voice that is like the questioning voice, which is always really interesting because the religion in particular and like how people view the magic and all these kinds of things is so one way. There's a whole thing about trying to get her to not be an atheist. And that is just such a fascinating thing where, she's using like logic and science to come against, the norm. And she's obviously heavily questioned for that. But the way she's exploring the world and, asking questions, it really lets us kind of like dive in and, open us up to other points of views. We don't just get the same point of view and of the world. And I mean that from like a society aspect. It's really easy when you read books, you're planted in, even if it's a few characters, a lot of times they have a general understanding of how their world works and they don't really question it. They might not value the same things. You might have characters who think their religions, their gods, whatever are happening in the universe are dumb, but you don't really get the examination that you do through Yesna. And that's a really unique aspect to her character that was really great. And lastly, I'll talk about Shallan, I think is how you say it. And I would just say the big twist you get from her at the end of the book, or towards the end of the book, man, blew my mind. That was wild. If you know what I'm talking about. Really threw me for a loop. Not what I expected at all. Really came out of left field. And this was another character, she is apprenticing under Yesna, but she kind of has some of those questioning, but still holding on to the worldview that most of the world has. And so to kind of see those two things battle it out inside of one person was really interesting. And then also to just see them kind of try to balance out their actions and what they have done with what they're trying to do. I don't know, she was just really fascinating and kind of opened us up into some really interesting things. Some kind of creepy scenes that happened with her that I think were just really cool, but we're very questioning. And obviously you can tell I like when we're questioning what's going on and kind of being led to try to figure something out. I don't just need everything spoon-fed to me. So when these kind of questions are asked and we're allowed to kind of like explore and come up with theories of our own, which, I did guess one or two things that I thought were going to happen in this book. It's just nice. And she's kind of like another avenue to explore that along with Yesna. So I think that's enough for the characters I want to mention in the good. I will now mention just the world in general. And man, does this world, we don't get like a crazy amount of it in this book, but it feels really big. It feels like there is a lot out there that we're going to, be able to explore, and, we'll get to see a lot of different places and how things are going to interact and change as we go through. I mean, I know we kind of really get the two main factions in this book, but it just really seems like there's a lot out there. And, you know, I really do like that. That's one thing I really enjoyed about The Wheel of Time when I was reading that, is just how expansive everything was. You know, we didn't just stay in like one small country or the world, but the world felt, you know, so big. You know, we had so many things coming in and playing parts. And I think, you know, this is going to have the same kind of feel. We're just going to, you know, I'm so down to just like explore different countries and have our characters need to go to different places and just kind of, you know, explore the world. And so that is a huge positive for me. This almost goes back to the narrative structure a little bit, but I'm counting it as its own thing. And that is the mystery or mysteries, kind of the questioning that happens. And one thing I've noticed as I've read more and more Sanderson is he is like a mystery writer who just happens to also write fantasy. And that just works super well for me. Like I mentioned earlier when I was talking about Yesna and Shallan, those questionings and like trying to figure things out and like exploring things that haven't been explored either in a really long time or a mystery are great. And even Dalinar with his like, you know, visions and everything that's going on there, just all those mysteries and the questions you're having and everything are just... Sanderson does such a good job making me want to turn the next page. And that's always just so nice to really want to go, especially on a book that's as long as The Way of Kings is. You know, it just is, it's really nice to want to keep going and like having that urge to read. When I was getting towards the end of this book, I think I read on Audible for 6.5 hours in one day. It was on a Sunday, and I was just so invested in this book. It was just starting to click for me so well that, yeah, 6.5 hours in a day, and I wanted more, but I had to go to bed. So, you know, just that aspect of turning the page and wanting to know what's going on, fantastic. My last good thing I want to mention is, and it is kind of a character, but it's more of like the Cosmere tie-ins. This one with Hoid really felt like the most Cosmere-y connection. Like there's a bigger universe even than just this world going on. And, you know, I'm reading all of the Cosmere this year, or trying to. I don't know if I will. But I'm doing my best to get through everything and kind of get caught up. And, you know, just kind of seeing some things getting woven in. And, you know, everyone talks about how it's connected, but it's not, you know, it's not too much. But the fact that we kind of really got some stuff, and I'm really questioning, like, what is the point of this character? Like, where is he going to take us? What are we going to explore through him? And like, what kind of information he's going to bring in from other places? And just how is that all going to work together? This just kind of felt like the most book. I know he played a role in Warbreaker when I read that, but this was the first time where I was like, oh, this is like felt much more substantial, but not to a point where you needed to read everything else, but that, you know, you kind of just got that vibe. And so I don't know, it was kind of exciting, especially as I'm trying to read through everything. While this has been and will continue to be a mostly positive review, I do have to, you know, mention some of the things that didn't work for me. So, you know, the bad, though I don't really think there was much bad. I will just mention it did take me, I know I just talked about, you know, I binge read a lot of this and really got into the world, but it did take me a while to get to that point. When I first started reading this, you know, you're very much thrown to the wolves, which isn't that, you know, unusual for larger epic fantasy kind of series, but it did, you know, you're just kind of thrown in, you're getting names and places and like, why is this alliance doing this to this alliance? You know, this is supposed to be XYZ, you know, all that kind of stuff. And it just took me a little bit to get into it. And then, you know, you're changing character perspectives. And, you know, I've read a decent amount of fantasy at this point, and so it wasn't too jarring, but it just kind of, I don't know. And this is, I think, something I have is a personal thing where sometimes it just takes me a little bit to get into a story. And this was just one of those cases. And that is probably just more of a me thing than anything, but I'm going to have to chalk it up to a negative. My last negative, see, I said there wasn't going to be that many, is, and this is something that happens in a lot of stories where there's too many like ancillary kind of side characters. And what I'm thinking of and you know, remembering for this book in particular is the bridge crew, actual crew that Kaladin is with. You know, it just kind of gets to the point where there's so many of them, it's hard to care when something happens. And, you know, maybe it's not trying to get like the shock value. It's really being used as like a way to show consequences, like how bad things are and, you know, everything that's going on. But yeah, it just, you know, towards the end where it's like, oh, XYZ guy died, it's like, or, you know, whatever. I was just like, okay, outside of like a few of the crew, I'm not attached to them at any point really. So I don't know, that was just kind of like one of those things where it's like, oh, this happened, and it's like, okay, whatever. So, you know, I don't know if other people feel differently than that, But yeah, my one other negative I really had for this book. So overall, The Way of Kings was a fantastic read. I had a really, really great time with it. I did end up giving it 4 stars. It is ranked pretty high up. I actually, I give a rating to every single book I read, but I also rank them inside of a giant spreadsheet I have. Maybe at some point I can go through that. But yeah, each book is ranked, somewhere in there. And right now this is pretty high up. I'm still debating on if I like this or The Final Empire more. I really like The Final Empire. Right now, I think I have The Final Empire above The Way of Kings, but it's really close. And kind of the more I sit and reminisce on it, it might be something that I need to flip. We'll see. It's just one of those things. We'll have to see as I sit with it a little bit more. But I am super excited to get to the next book. I think it's The Words of Radiance. I haven't probably been this excited for a sequel book in a long series like this since I was reading Wheel of Time. It got to a point when Wheel of Time was happening that I was just binging those books back to back to back. And so it's been a while since I've been this excited to move forward. And so I'm really, really looking forward to the next book. But that's all I have for, this review. Let me know any of your thoughts down in the comments, and have a good one.